The Kyoto Protocol is an international agreement that was adopted on 11 December 1997. However, because it took time for all the countries to agree, it officially started on 16 February 2005. Today, 192 countries have joined this agreement. In simple terms, the Kyoto Protocol helps put into action the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It makes countries that are more developed or growing quickly reduce the amount of greenhouse gases they release into the air. These gases trap heat in the atmosphere, causing global warming. The UNFCCC itself only asks countries to take action and report their progress, but the Kyoto Protocol takes it further by giving specific targets to reduce emissions. The Kyoto Protocol is built on the ideas from the UNFCCC and has rules that are only for developed countries. It follows the idea of common but differentiated responsibility. This means that while all countries should help fight climate change, developed countries should do more because they have contributed more to the problem. The Kyoto Protocol has a list of countries in Annex B that have been given specific targets. It includes 37 developed countries and countries with economies in transition, as well as the European Union. Together, they agreed to reduce their emissions by 5% on average compared to what they were emitting in 1990. This reduction was to happen during the first commitment period from 2008 to 2012. Doha Amendment. The Doha Amendment was made to the Kyoto Protocol. It was adopted in Doha, Qatar on 8 December 2012. This amendment created a second phase of action starting in 2013 and lasting until 2020. By 28 October 2020, 147 countries accepted this agreement, which means the goal of having at least 144 countries agree was reached. Because of this, the Doha Amendment officially became active on 31 December 2020. What does the Doha Amendment include? New promises. The Annex 1 countries under the Kyoto Protocol agreed to new commitments for a second period lasting from January 1, 2013 to December 31, 2020. More greenhouse gases. A revised list of greenhouse gases to be reported on by parties in the second commitment period. Changes to the original Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol was updated by changing several articles that dealt with issues from the first commitment period, making them relevant for the second commitment period. On December 21, 2012, the United Nations Secretary General shared an amendment with all countries in the Kyoto Protocol. This was done according to the rules of the protocol. In the first commitment period, 37 industrialized countries, economies in transition, and the European Community promised to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by an average of 5% compared to 1990 levels. In the second commitment period, countries agreed to cut emissions by at least 18% below 1990 levels during the 8-year period from 2013 to 2020. However, the countries involved in the second period were not the same as in the first. The Kyoto Protocol introduced flexible ways for countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through trading emissions permits. Countries are expected to meet their targets using national methods, but they can also use 3 market-based mechanisms to help, namely International Emissions Trading, Clean Development Mechanism (CDM), Joint Implementation (JI). These methods aim to reduce greenhouse gas emissions where it's cheapest, often in developing countries. It doesn't matter where emissions are cut as long as they are removed from the atmosphere. This approach encourages green investment in developing countries and involves private companies in reducing emissions. It also makes it more affordable for developing nations to adopt cleaner technologies instead of relying on older, more polluting ones. The Kyoto Protocol established a strict system to ensure that countries meet their climate goals. This system includes monitoring and reporting. Countries must track and report their actual greenhouse gas emissions and keep detailed records of emission trades. The UN Climate Change Secretariat in Germany verifies that these transactions follow the protocol's rules. Registry systems. These systems record all transactions made by the countries under the protocol's mechanisms. Compliance system. This ensures countries meet their commitments. If they struggle, the system helps them get back on track. Adaptation support. The protocol also assists countries in adapting to the harmful effects of climate change by promoting technologies that improve resilience. Adaptation Fund was established to finance adaptation projects in developing countries. In the first commitment period, it was funded by proceeds from Clean Development Mechanism projects. In 2012, at a meeting in Doha, it was decided that during the second commitment period, 2% of the money from international emissions trading and joint implementation would go to the Adaptation Fund. First Kyoto mechanism is emissions trading. Countries that have commitments under the Kyoto Protocol, called Annex B parties, have agreed to specific targets for limiting or reducing greenhouse gas emissions. These targets are set for the 2008 to 2012 period and are known as assigned amounts, which are divided into smaller units called assigned amount units, AAUs. Emissions trading under Article 17 of the Kyoto Protocol, countries that have extra emission units, those who emit less than their allowed amount, can sell these unused units to countries that are over their targets. This creates a market where emission reductions are treated as a tradable commodity, often referred to as the carbon market. Since carbon dioxide is the main greenhouse gas, people often refer to this trading as carbon trading. Other tradable units. Besides AAUs, other units can be traded under the Kyoto Protocol, each representing 1 ton of carbon dioxide. These include removal unit, RMU, based on activities like reforestation, land use change, and forestry. Emission Reduction Unit, ERU, generated by joint implementation projects. Certified Emission Reduction, CER, created from Clean Development Mechanism projects. All transfers and sales of these units are tracked through registry systems under the Kyoto Protocol, and an international transaction log ensures that these transfers are secure. Commitment Period Reserve. To prevent countries from overselling their units and then failing to meet their own emission targets, each country must maintain a reserve of ERUs, CERs, AAUs, and RMUs in their national registry. This reserve must be at least 90% of the country's assigned amount or 100% of 5 times its most recent emission inventory, whichever is smaller. Relationship to other emission trading schemes. Some countries and regions have created their own emissions trading systems to help reduce emissions. These systems set emission limits for participating entities, and the European Union Emissions Trading Scheme is the largest one currently in operation. Second Kyoto Mechanism, the Clean Development Mechanism. The Clean Development Mechanism, CDM, outlined in Article 12 of the Kyoto Protocol, allows countries with emission reduction commitments, Annex B countries, to carry out emission reduction projects in developing nations. These projects can earn Certified Emission Reduction Credits, CER, with each CER representing 1 ton of carbon dioxide, which can be used to help meet the Kyoto targets. The CDM is considered a pioneering approach as it was the first global environmental investment and credit system providing a standard way to offset emissions with CERs. Examples of CDM projects include rural electrification using solar panels or installing more energy efficient boilers. The mechanism promotes sustainable development and helps reduce emissions while giving industrialized countries some flexibility in achieving their emission reduction goals. Key details of the CDM include projects must result in emission reductions beyond what would have happened without them. A CDM project needs to reduce more emissions than what would have happened if the project didn't exist. They must go through a strict public approval process overseen by designated national authorities. Public funding for these projects should not divert official development assistance, means the money used for these projects shouldn't take away from other important help that developing countries receive. The CDM is managed by the CDM Executive Board, which reports to the countries that have signed the Kyoto Protocol. Since becoming operational in 2006, the CDM has registered over 1,650 projects and is expected to generate more than 2.9 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent CERs during the first commitment period 2008 to 2012. Third Kyoto mechanism, joint implementation. Joint implementation is a mechanism created under Article 6 of the Kyoto Protocol. It allows a country called an Annex B party that has a commitment to reduce or limit its greenhouse gas emissions to earn credits by supporting projects that reduce emissions in another Annex B party country. These credits, known as emission reduction units, ERUs, are equal to 1 ton of carbon dioxide and can be used to meet the country's Kyoto Protocol targets. How JI works. A country can invest in projects in another country to reduce GHG emissions or remove carbon from the atmosphere. The host country, where the project takes place, benefits by receiving foreign investment and gaining access to better technology. Both countries benefit. The investing country meets its emission reduction goals more affordably, and the host country reduces its emissions while improving its infrastructure. Eligibility for JI projects. The project must result in emission reductions that are beyond what would have happened naturally. The host country must approve the project. Participants in the project must be authorized by one of the countries involved. Projects can qualify for JI if they started after the year 2000, but the emission credits, ERUs, can only be counted starting from 2008. Track 1 procedure. If the host country meets all the necessary eligibility requirements, it can manage and verify its own emission reduction projects. The host country can issue ERUs directly once it verifies the project reduces emissions or enhances removals beyond what would normally happen. Track 2 procedure. If the host country does not fully meet the eligibility requirements, the project's emission reductions must be verified by the Joint Implementation Supervisory Committee, JESC. The JISC appoints an independent agency to check if the project meets all the requirements before the host country can issue and transfer ERUs. Flexibility. Even if a country qualifies for Track 1, it can choose to use the more strict Track 2 procedure if it wants.